Hi, Acadiana. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Happy Wednesday to you. A little cloudy out there. Had some rain across parts of Acadiana. Picked up about just under a half an inch of rain here at the house over the last couple of hours. Had a pretty good downpour there during about that 10:30 to 11:30 time period. And there are more scattered storms that are out there. And we'll be talking about possibility of some development a little farther down the road. It looks like the next 7 days are going to stay pretty quiet, but as we go out beyond 7 days, some of the global models are showing some action maybe in the southeastern Gulf or the western part of the Atlantic. Kind of a similar setup that we had with Tropical Storm Chantal last weekend. But I'm going to point out a few specific things that I'm a little more concerned about for the reasons of that location there over the southeastern Gulf, where some of those water temperatures are very warm and we've got some high heat content as well. Real quick, though, at least here in Lafayette, we have cloud cover now. Had the rain, but it's just cloudy right now. Temperature dropping back to 75 degrees, I believe, is what the temperature should be. Yeah, it should be 75 on there. And that dew point is running at 73. So I'll go ahead and make that adjustment there. 75 is the current temperature. And you can see there's some wet roadways that are out there too. And also, you're probably noticing on at least one of those cameras, the Henderson camera there, you can see some traffic that's backed up. That is heading eastbound toward Baton Rouge. It looks like there's an issue on the Basin Bridge. So you're starting to get things to back up a little bit there. And then not exactly sure why my Bro Bridge camera says 5 o'clock on there, but that is Bro Bridge, by the way. And Bro Bridge is looking at good traffic there, but do keep that in mind that if you're going a little bit farther off toward the east toward Henderson, you are going to run into some of that action there. So it looks like my traffic cams might be going down here, but a lot of sunshine in Opelousas. Alexandria's got some sunshine, while Ambassador Caffrey exit there at I-10 and the I-10 out of I-49 has a little bit of rainfall there. Beautiful day over in Orange Beach this afternoon. Dauphin Island, another gorgeous day out there. That's one of my favorite places on the Gulf Coast, by the way. Biloxi, Mississippi, looking all right as well. You got some dark skies there over the western horizon, so that would be looking toward Louisiana. And from Cocodrie, we could see a pretty good thunderhead there off in the distance. This camera is actually looking off toward the west. And we've got some stormy skies today there along the northern Gulf Coast over around Galveston, Texas. So we can confirm that, obviously, with the radar, and you can see that we've got a decent amount of rain that's popping up. It's widely scattered, so you got a lot of areas where you're not seeing any rain, and then you've got some heavy downpours there north of the I-10 in St. Martin Parish. That stretches westward to around Opelousas. You got some decent rains on LA-13 south of Eunice, and you've also got some moderate to heavy rains there over parts of Jeff Davis Parish. So if you're on I-10 or LA-26 or maybe the 165 there, you're going to have some issues, and it gets a little more scattered as you get a little farther toward the west. And I think the best rain chances are going to be over southeast Texas and extreme southwestern portions of Louisiana as we go into the afternoon. So let's look at the big picture and kind of tie in some of the tropics. And one of the things I want to point out is another front that's going to be kind of moving across the country. And we've got a series of fronts that's going to work its way over toward the East Coast. And if you remember what happened with Chantal over the course of the weekend, we had a front kind of settle in here, and then you had low pressure develop along that front. We might be seeing this setting up as we go into not this weekend, but the following weekend. So you're talking about July 19th, 20th, getting into that range. And the area that we're going to be watching is over here over the southeastern Gulf of Mexico. And that's why we're going to be talking more about some of the water temperatures, the heat content, and all that could be a little unnerving for that part of the Gulf. So upper level pattern, big ridge in the west. Bermuda Ridge is holding as well. So, of course, we've got that warm, moist air that's coming off the Gulf. Boating today, you will have some scattered showers and thunderstorms in the offshore waters. And, of course, that'll produce higher winds and seas. You know the drill. Get out of the way of those. But as a general rule, we're just looking at some southwesterly winds, and those seas should be running about 1 to 2 feet. So there's a look at the Gulf. And one of the things that's probably going to hit your eye right away is all of that moisture you're seeing there in the Bay of Campeche there on the southwestern side of the Gulf, right about in here. This is the area that we're talking about. So there's a couple of things that's happening. We've got an upper level low that's moving along the Texas Gulf Coast. That's what's been providing us with a little bit more unstable conditions and those better chances for showers and thunderstorms. And a little farther down to the south, it's more of a tropical wave that's moving westward across Central America and southern Mexico. So the combination of the two is producing a lot of heavy rain, and there's a lot of moisture there over the western part of the Gulf as well. But at this point, we're not seeing any tropical development or anything that's looking like it would be hinting toward developing. So we do think a lot of this moisture is just going to continue to drift off toward the west into Mexico. We've also got more of an upper trough, and you can see that a little bit better here on the water vapor imagery. There's a low right about there in the upper levels. And when you look at the Central American satellite, you can see that low pressure spin a little bit better right about in there. But again, this is in the upper levels. When you want tropical systems to develop, they've got to develop down at the surface of the water. And when you got something that's spinning high in the atmosphere, you don't normally get that low pressure to work its way down to the bottom and actually get a tropical system to develop. So we're not expecting anything there. There's also a bit of a tropical wave that's over the southwestern portion of the Caribbean. That's right about in there. And that is interacting with that upper level low. And that's bringing some rains over Venezuela, northern Colombia, and probably some more heavier downpours are going to affect Jamaica and Cuba a little later in the afternoon. Looking farther out, there are a number of tropical waves that are coming across the Atlantic at this point. You'll probably also notice you can see a big plume of Saharan dust that's moving off toward the west as well. You can see that evident on the satellite as the sun gets right there over the Caribbean there in those latter frames for the mid part of the afternoon. So again, with all that Saharan dust out there, that's going to inhibit some of the development. So we've got all of that, and you've got a lot of wind shear out there with the Saharan dust too. And we'll talk about the forecasts of both of those. But because of all that mess that's out there, we're really not expecting any tropical cyclone activity here over the next week. We'll take a quick peek at the Pacific. Nothing going on, no named systems out there, which has been unusual from what we've seen. They've had a fairly busy season so far. They've already gotten to Flossie, so they're on the F storm, going to the G storm. While we're going to move on to Dexter sometime in the next couple of weeks, probably. But as far as the Pacific, I think things are going to stay relatively quiet for the next week or so. So now let's get into the analysis and part of the reasons why I'm starting to grow a little more concerned about that particular area here as we go into the next week and a half to 2 weeks or so. And one of the things that you're going to notice is all of this 30, 32 degree Celsius water. So you're talking about anywhere between 86 and 90 degree water that we've got here along the Louisiana Gulf Coast, and that stretches eastward to the beaches of Mississippi and Alabama. But even there through the central part of the Gulf, you've got those water temperatures that are over 30 degrees Celsius. So that's over 86. All you need is water at about 80 degrees to be able to sustain tropical systems. And that water there along the northern Gulf Coast and the eastern part of the Gulf as well has really jumped in temperatures here over the last several weeks. So what is that going to mean a little farther down the road? Is there a possibility that a tropical system that's already fairly strong could move over those warmer waters and actually strengthen before it reaches the coast of Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, or Alabama? Or are we going to see what we normally see when it starts to interact more with land, or you get a little more wind shear from the upper level westerlies that come across the United States? Are we going to see things torn apart? So that might come into play with other tropical systems that could develop a little bit farther down the road. And a lot of times when you get a mass of moisture in the atmosphere that wants to kind of sit in that eastern part of the Gulf waters, when you've got those very warm temperatures and you get a lot of moisture out there, sometimes you can get tropical systems that will fester out there for a number of days and eventually become a tropical system. So again, we're not expecting anything between now and the early part of next week. So I would say between now and next Wednesday, another week or so, we don't have much to talk about. But look at the tropical cyclone heat potential, particularly again over the eastern part of the Gulf and much of the western part of the Caribbean. If we get one of these fronts to kind of push its way even farther toward the south, and you get that moisture to start to linger in that particular area here, say over the eastern part of the Gulf, occasionally you can get a tropical depression to start to spin up. Now, that's not going to happen again over the next couple of days because there's a lot of inhibiting factors out there. And just showing you the Atlantic wide view of the wind shear, and you can see that it's pretty prevalent across much of the Gulf, the Caribbean. You got some very strong wind shear. That continues out over much of the Atlantic. It's a little lower where you get those tropical waves to come across the Atlantic. But I want to take you out to next weekend. So this is going to take you out to July the 19th. This is next Saturday. And you can see, compare the two. We'll go back and forth. Look at all that wind shear over the Atlantic. And then it just disappears. So as we get into the latter part of July, a lot of time that wind shear does start to slow down. It starts to drop off a little bit. And that allows tropical systems to develop a little bit easier, because if you've got a developing system in a high wind shear environment, those early thunderstorms and the organization just gets ripped apart. If you've got low wind shear, then it's got a favorable environment to grow and get a good vertically stacked center, and that's how tropical systems are able to strengthen. Another thing that is an inhibiting factor, of course, is the Saharan dust. We've been talking about this really most of the week, and toward the end of last week, we were talking about this new plume that's coming off the African coast. It's zipping its way across the Atlantic and is over the islands right now, and I think some of this is going to work its way into the Gulf and probably over Louisiana as we head into the weekend. So look forward to some hazy skies once again, and perhaps some pretty sunrises and sunsets. So let's go through the next 10 days. And one of the things I want you to kind of watch out for here is over the southeastern part of the Gulf of Mexico. So we're going today out to the next 10 days. You see that right there, that bit of a low pressure area? Again, that is coming up for next weekend, not this weekend. It's coming up for next weekend. And with that, we could see the possibility of low pressure. There's already going to be some leftover moisture in that area. And if you got a front that slides in, sometimes you can get tropical development. And I'm going to go into more details here about that particular area at that particular time in just a second. So hang with me. Euro model doesn't show what the GFS is showing. So at this point, we're not seeing anything on this latest model run, but I will say the Euro model was hinting at some lower pressures over the eastern part of the Gulf going toward the latter part of next week and into next weekend on some of the models yesterday. So it's not completely clear yet. It looks, yesterday's Euro looked a lot more like what the GFS did, with something trying to get going there over the eastern part of the Gulf. This is the GFS rerunning, and you see that low right there. Canadian model has a little bit of a twist, maybe a little bit of a low pressure area trying to develop, but this one looks like it's trying to develop more over Georgia, Alabama, and Florida, and maybe not quite as far off into the Gulf. So even though we're seeing some lowering pressures over parts of the southeast going into next weekend, it's kind of inconclusive. It looks like it would try to spin something up over land, which of course would not become a tropical system. And then finally on the icon, this one only goes out 7 days, but as you get to the tail end, you start to see the concentration of moisture over the eastern part of the Gulf right about there. That's taking us into next Monday and Tuesday. So it doesn't go quite as far out as some of the other models do, but we're going to look at some of the other factors specifically for next weekend here in just a bit. But what's interesting is the Euro model was showing some possibilities of tropical formation either in the eastern Gulf or the western Atlantic. It is a little bit lower of a chance than what it was yesterday, sometime between July 14th and the 21st, but still that far out, it's still talking about a 20% chance, or possibly about that much, to see a tropical system develop. And what's interesting is the Global Tropics Hazards Outlook was issued yesterday. So this is a brand new map. And you can see that the northern Gulf is kind of highlighted for that week too. So that's the same time frame there between July 16th and July the 22nd. So let's get into some of the let's interact with some of these models here and analyze. So what I'm looking at here, first of all, is next week. So this is June let's see, this is Wednesday of next week. So you're talking about June 16th. And I kind of want you to pay a little bit of attention. Let me see if I can get this telestrator to go. I want you to kind of watch that particular area right in there. Notice how you get that deeper moisture that starts to gather there between Wednesday of next week and perhaps getting into about Saturday. And parts of the reason why I'm a little more concerned about that is because that's where we're starting to see those very warm water temperatures over the eastern part of the Gulf waters. So your low pressure area, you can see here, according to the model, those pressures drop there. Again, this is next Thursday going into Friday. So you see the lower pressure. So that's kind of the hint there. And then, of course, when you're talking about your wind shear, the wind shear is a little bit high in that area during that time frame, but it does tend to drop off. Now, all three of those looks were from the GFS model. I want to go over to the European model real quick. And I got to take the 0Z because remember the 0Z and the 12Z go out a lot farther than the other ones do. So the Euro again is a little more inconclusive, but if you see that trough there over the southeast and you see that gathering of moisture, the dates on here is more closer to Saturday. So remember the GFS was talking about maybe next Thursday, Friday, while the Euro is looking at more next Saturday and Sunday, so a little farther down the road. So maybe they've got a little bit of agreement that there's going to be some low pressure and some building moisture in that particular area, but the timing is off right now with the GFS going considerably faster than what the Euro shows. Also wanted to show you the amounts of moisture that's going to be kind of pulling into that area too on the Euro. And you can see you get that moisture building there over Florida and the eastern part of the Gulf. Again, this is late next Friday through about that following Monday. So you're talking about the 19th through the 21st of July. So it's a long ways out, but some of the hints are there. And as I said, this is going to be a similar setup to what I think Tropical Storm Chantel had done back last weekend. So it's kind of the same setup. Will this actually happen? Kind of unsure right now, but at least there are some hints in the models and with the global tropics hazard outlook and the Euro model calling for some possible tropical cyclone genesis there over the Gulf or the Western Atlantic in that time frame. That's why we're going to start to pay a little bit more attention to that particular area sometime toward the middle part of next week. But of course, I'll go over those models each and every day and kind of just see how they change. And if we start to get more global models agreeing and they start coming together on some of the timing, then we start to buy into that forecast a little bit better. So again, nothing to worry about for the next week or so, but I would start to be paying attention that following week. We are a little bit ahead of schedule on our name storms. We've had 3 so far, and usually we don't get our third name storm until the beginning of August. We have not had any hurricanes yet. Generally, our first hurricane on average comes at or about August the 11th, so about a month from now. So are we going to see a new tropical system or possibly get our first hurricane sometime here before we get into August? Now, July is a relatively quiet month. It is about double the amount of action we would normally see in June, but then it really skyrockets after the 1st of August comes and we peak out at September 10th. And remember, the last couple of years, our hurricane season has seemed to start a little bit later and go a little bit later in the season. Last year, we had a number of tropical systems during the month of November. So you still got to keep your guard up, even though usually things start to relax here along the northern Gulf Coast as you get toward the middle part of October. So make sure you're doing your preparations now and getting the items that you would need in order to ride out a hurricane or a tropical storm locally, or if it's going to be a little stronger one, you got to have your other plans on evacuating or whether you're going to be staying in a shelter or visiting with friends, things like that. So there are a lot of plans that you can do, and there's a lot of stuff that you can gather right now that's already at all of the local stores, and you won't have any problems finding those things. And again, there's a little example of some of the things that you can grab right now. All that stuff is at the store, and you're not going to have to fight anybody for it because we don't have any tropical systems coming around. And usually, as human nature goes, we start to prep when there's actually a threat rather than ahead of time. But if you do this early, you'll be ahead of the game, and it'll be a lot easier and you'll be a little more relaxed, believe me, as you get ready for a tropical storm or hurricane. My family, it runs a little bit different. So there's a lot of times I've got to do my preps. A couple of days earlier than what most people would do, just because of what I have to do work wise. So occasionally, yeah, I have been able to, move in all the patio furniture and things like that and get all prepared, and then have a tropical system miss us and go in a different direction. So I, did all that work for no reason, but I know that had it done and I was ready to go, and then I could focus what I needed to do when the tropical storm or hurricane start to come our way. So do keep that in mind. Just try to get that stuff together. Well, I hope you enjoyed Let's Talk Tropics. Please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and turn on those notifications. And also remember, you can hear my forecasts on Big 102.1, Planet Radio 106.7, and Freedom 95.1. In between, you can follow my social media pages on Facebook and X. And thanks to everyone who subscribed to Acadiana Weather Today right here on YouTube. I'm meteorologist Dave Baker. Hope to see you for Acadiana Weather Today tomorrow morning at 7, and for Let's Talk Tropics tomorrow afternoon live at noon. See you then.